Hi there, and welcome to Her Season of Strength, where women over 40 reclaim their bodies, their energy, and their voices without apologies. I'm Kim Duffy, registered dietitian, personal trainer, mom, and your biggest hype woman when it comes to aging like you mean it. This show isn't about chasing skinny or counting wrinkles. It's about building real strength, physical, emotional, and hormonal. Each week, I'll share straight-talking nutrition tips, sustainable fitness strategies, and conversations that help you feel powerful in your skin once again. Menopause isn't an ending, it's only the beginning. This is your season of strength. Hello, and welcome back to Her Season of Strength. I am so happy you're here and taking just a second out of your day to listen in with whatever you're doing. If you're walking, if you're doing dishes, if you're multitasking, whatever. That's typically when I'm listening to podcasts too, but I am running around here wanting to get this podcast episode in before my parents are coming to town and my son is coming back through the area before he heads back down to his baby and his wife in Huntsville. So I am busy multitasking as we women are frequently doing. But so I wanted to jump in and talk about a little bit more of a personal story that I think that you'll hopefully be able to take something from. So I want to start with just saying, have you ever had a moment, maybe a moment or a period in time in your life that kind of completely rewired the way you see your life, the way you see time and the way you see, your own body and what you're capable of? I have, and I wanted to tell you about it today because I think, it might change something in the way you think about yourself and how you look at this time in your life. So when I was 41 years old, my youngest daughter, Cecelia, was 12. She was diagnosed with leukemia. And this was just hit me from out of the blue. She had just been sick. She had a fever. She was very pale. She just couldn't shake this bug or this flu. And we were living up in Canada at the time, where we were just there temporarily for 2 years. And so I was taking her from doctor to doctor, trying to figure out what the heck was going on, right? And she was diagnosed with leukemia, and we were immediately put in the hospital because it's a type of leukemia that's very aggressive, and you need to treat it very aggressively. And so she did 4 rounds initially, and each round it took about a month. So it was her and me living in the hospital. I would switch out with my husband on the weekends, and he would come and stay, and then I would go home with our other 2 older kids and hang with them. And I just remember it created this total shift in my thinking. I'd start to just be very grateful for what I had. I'd see others in public, and I'd be thinking, you know what, we need to treat everyone with kindness because you just don't know what another person is going through. Even if they might be acting one way, maybe they're grumpy or they're not speaking or, we need to realize that there's a lot going on behind people's eyes, in their brains, and we don't know. They might be acting one way and feeling another way. And so I think it really made me think of just kindness and the importance of kindness. Well, we lost Cecelia, about 9 months after she was diagnosed. And, when you watch your 12-year-old run out of time, you cannot ever look at your own life the same way again. Sorry if I get a little choked up here. So this experience planted a seed in me, even in, the darkest time of my life, about what a life well lived actually looks like. Because life goes on when you lose a loved one. We moved back here from Canada after that. I just remember it was so important just to get back to what we knew, the place where we had lived for, 20 years before we moved up to Canada. And I was like, I just need to get back there. This is where, we buried Celia, and this is where I wanted to be, and all my friends and all my support system. And I went back to working in the hospital again, in the same hospital that I was working at prior to going up to Canada in a clinical role in the cancer center. And the work was so meaningful. I mean, people are like, how could you go and work with people in the cancer center? I said, well, I was working with adults. I was not working with children. And I intimately knew what it was like to be a caregiver. I feel like it gave me such empathy for the people who were caring for their loved ones, but also for the people that were going through cancer, because I knew, personally, or intimately from what, going through it with Seal, I knew the symptoms and the side effects and when to push and when to not, right? There's something safe about the familiar. Grief can make us hold tighter to what we know. And, that about, 10 years later, 9 years later, I started thinking about something different. Thinking about like, is this all? Is this how I want to spend the rest of my life? Like, is there more? Do I want to do more? And I guess people always say, you're so strong. How did you go through that? Well, I think that's so interesting when you hear that, because you're like, I had no choice. If I had a choice to say, oh, either my daughter can stay here and I won't be as strong, or, you could be stronger and lose your child. Well, no, like, absolutely. I'd love to be weak and still have Celia here, but that is not an option. And so, what I chose was to live life because I had 2 children who were still on this earth, and I needed to make sure that they could live and want to thrive. And so I phrased it as, we are going to live the life that your little sister can't. And we, in a sense, we worked with our church to help build a school in Cecelia's name, which is very important to us. We created a scholarship starting with the class when she should have graduated at her high school. And we gave back to Ronald McDonald House because they were so amazing in giving us a place to stay and sleep and get away from the beeping of the ICU towards the end of Seal's life. And as well as the Children's Cancer Research Fund, which wasn't specifically related to Canada, but it was a place here in Minnesota that gives back to children with cancer and helps to, with research and all that stuff. So these are the ways that I chose to move forward. And I chose to teach my children to move forward, to give back to their community, to give back to others, because it helps to fill you up. It's selfish, right? It's a little selfish. But going back to kind of my life, I decided in my, at the age of 50 to leave my clinical job, to become a personal trainer, to start my own private practice. And this wasn't just a career change. It felt like I was finally kind of honoring the promise that I quietly made myself the day I lost Celia, that I was going to live. I think about her every single day, and I think the greatest thing I can do is to honor her, is to use the time I have to keep her memory alive, but to also live my life, live the life that she couldn't. So here's the thing. My story is my story, right? We all have grief in our lives. We all have trauma we've experienced. But what I've discovered in working, with hundreds of women in midlife is that this feeling of wanting to kind of break free and rebuild and reclaim your life, it isn't just emotional. There's actually biology behind it. For decades, estrogen has, it's amplified our brain's responsiveness to other people's needs, literally wiring women towards nurturing others and caring for others. And as we see that estrogen declines in peri and postmenopause, that wiring kind of shifts. Many women will say that they have increased clarity and decisiveness and less anxiety about others' opinions, which I know I did. This isn't dysfunction. This is freedom. As our hormonal cocktail changes, that compulsive need to keep everyone else comfortable often softens. Women start asking, like, what do I actually want? Perhaps for the first time in your lives. Just as nesting in pregnancy is driven by biology and hormones, so is this urge to shed, to simplify, and to kind of redirect that energy inward. It's a real documented phenomenon called the unnesting instinct. A lot of people might say, oh, it's a midlife crisis. This isn't a crisis of any sort. This is a midlife recalibration. Our brain is literally handing us back to ourselves. So, if your brain, your biology are handing you this kind of open door, this invitation to build a new life, the question becomes, what are the tools that actually help you to walk through it? So for me personally, I know that exercise is therapy for my mental health, right? Strength training it's not optional for me or really for any other woman out there, because we know we start losing muscle as we age. We know that we start losing bone density and our metabolisms can decrease because of that loss of muscle, that increase in fat. So, muscle mass, it protects our bones, it supports our metabolism, it creates that physical confidence that feeds everything else, right? When we feel strong in our bodies, we make bolder decisions about, in our life. And that's not a coincidence. I didn't become a personal trainer because it was trendy. I became one because I watched what strength training did for women who had given up on their bodies. And it changed everything. That is the best part of being a trainer is having women come in and think, oh, I can't do this. I have this injury or this pain or this going on. And to see them actually grow that strength, but more importantly, grow that confidence in what they can do. Right? And they'll tell me oh gosh, you know what? I walked up this hill and normally I would be so winded and I'd have to take all this time to do that. And now I can, basically jog up the hill and feel great, feel strong. That's pretty cool. And it's so empowering. This is yet another thing that it's yeah, I know that you're getting all this benefit, but I selfishly it's empowering me as well to see that, because it's not just the act of the strength training. It is what it is doing for us and what we want to do in our future, in the rest of our lives. We want to be strong. We want to be able to travel and to play with our grandbabies and just live life as compared to sitting at home, sitting on the couch, watching TV because maybe our knees hurt and our hips hurt and we just can't move as easily as we used to. No way, man. That's just not what I want. I don't want to be getting to the end of my life just waiting to die. I want to, you hear that phrase, it's I want to come in screeching, speeding in a car and screeching to a halt. And the next thing is, when it comes to nutrition, it's the fuel that makes all this possible. So, I'd be oh, eat your vegetables, get your protein in. And it's not as much of that as is women were chronically underfueling our bodies because we're always trying to get skinnier. We're always trying to get smaller. And we need to throw that out. Throw that brain fart out, right? We need to focus on things like protein. I want to keep my muscles strong. And as I am putting in this time and energy to strength train, I want to make sure I'm giving my muscles what they need to get stronger. And that's protein. I mean, when we look at our energy, our mood, our focus, our recovery, these things are all very important, right? And it all comes back to the nutrition piece, okay? It all comes back to how we're feeding our bodies. It's not about restriction or dieting. It's just about feeding your body like you respect it, like your life depends on it, because it does. You can't build a vibrant second half of life on an empty tank. So, I told you the story about Cecelia and losing her when I was 41, leaving my safe career with all the benefits and stuff at 50. And every single day I wake up, I think about the time I have and what I want to do with it. And that's not morbid. That's just the most motivating thing that I know. So if you have, kind of that quiet itch, that restlessness, that sense that this chapter of life could be the most powerful one yet, you're not broken, you're ready. And this is not selfish. Your body is asking for something, your brain is asking for something, and I want to help you give it exactly what it needs. So as I'm finishing up here, I want to bring it around to something I've been working on, and I'm so excited to share it with you. I've talked about it a couple of times in the past episodes. This episode's going to be dropping on June 11th, and then just 5 days later, on June 16th, I am opening the cart for the Easy Prep Blueprint, and that's exclusively for women that are on the priority list. So this program is basically your solution for that, the busy midlife woman who wants simple, strategic nutrition and strength that actually fits her life, right? So it's focused on that nutrition piece. How can we fuel our bodies for energy without having to spend hours in the kitchen, right? How can we do that? And that's what I want to teach you, just step by step. Simple ways that we can build our nutrition up without, even if we aren't a good cook or even if we don't enjoy cooking specifically. And today I decided that the first 5 women to enroll in the program will get a 60-minute nutritional deep dive with me personally. That's like $149 value. So I want you to look at your individual picture. And then we'll work up a real plan when it comes to nutrition. What would be the best plan for you to reach your goals? So to get early access, to get the lowest price, and that chance to be one of the first 5, you need to be on the priority list. So I'm going to put the link in the show notes. Get on the list before June 15th. Okay, the list is going to close on June 15th because I'm going to be opening the doors just to the people on the list on the 16th. So don't miss this. Thank you so much for being here today. If this episode meant something to you, share it with a woman in your life who needs to hear it. Leave a review if you're feeling generous. It means the world. And just remember, this is about progress over perfection. We are in this for the long haul, and this is your season of strength. Have a fantastic day.